Giorgio, Villani. I run the Houston Web3 Meet-Up along with Margaret. And I'm really excited about this presentation that Daniel Calderon is going to do today on generative art. It was kind of a complicated thing to organize because of this, the hurricane tornado that came through Houston. So much, disruption that it created. But Sesh co-working space done by Maggie and Meredith. They came through. I showed up this morning. I came over here and I was like, "Hey, we don't have a spot right now because half of Houston doesn't have power. Can we do it here?" And they were like, "Absolutely, you should totally do it here." So they were extremely accommodating, and it's a great co-working space. The people here are amazing. Great environment. And so definitely, if you guys have a moment, check it out. After this event. Absolutely wanna introduce Daniel. I'm really excited about the generative. I saw kind of a smaller version of this one, and I was like, man, this is like Houston needs to hear more about this generative art stuff. So
Marfa.
Oh, and then Marfa, yeah, and then Marfa. That's another.
Last year.
Yeah, we were there last year at the big event. Daniel was there along with his brother, and so yeah. Without further ado, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm what you might call a generative artist. I make artwork that looks like this, and this, and this. And my tools do not look like this, but instead they look like this. I use only two tools, a laptop and a web browser. Then I write computer code to form an algorithm. An algorithm is a set of instructions or a sequence of steps. For example, I start with a dot. I draw another dot. Connect them with a line. Repeat with two more dots. And start the process over again at each new endpoint. Do it again, and again, and again. An algorithm can be simple with just a few rules, like on the left, or it can be super complex like the one on the right. And developers know what I'm talking about. We call this spaghetti code. I use algorithms like this to build up visual compositions. This is a branching algorithm I wrote a few years ago. At the very heart of the generative art algorithm is unpredictability. Chance and randomness are injected into the algorithm to produce outcomes that are unique, unexpected, surprising, and emergent. As a generative artist, it is my role to harness and use these ideas and processes as a means of expression. Is this a novel concept? Actually, no, it's not. Mozart did it 1792. He played the musical dice game, and it involves rolling some dice, picking notes from a sequence of prearranged measures, and then using them to construct generative sheet music. Likewise, in 1866, John Venn, the creator of the Venn diagram, also created a drawing using a set of rules and random choices. In this case, the rule is draw a line which at every instant is as likely to take one direction as another. So from this simple rule, infinite possibilities of randomness can occur, and a basic generative system is born. With the rise of computers in the 1940s, a new type of randomness was created, the PRNG, or pseudo-random number generator. And these PRNGs are deterministic, consistent, and they produce predictable numbers. So a PRNG is basically, it's like a little engine, and you feed it a random seed, and it produces a whole bunch of random numbers. A seed value can be basically any kind of like input. It could be a single word, a number, a letter, or a bunch of random stuff. It's not actually a seed, like from a farmer. So using PRNGs allowed early American computer scientists like Herbert Frank to explore graphical compositions of lines and shapes using randomness. So this was the birth of computer generative art in the early 1960s. Pioneers were using computers the size of entire rooms. Instead of graphical display monitors, most of the output required a plotting device, which is basically a mechanical arm with a pen attached to it that draws on a sheet of paper really precisely. So this was actually the precursor to the monitor. And computer programmers, they usually had to wait for the plotter to finish before they could see the output of their algorithm. So in the late 1960s, Vera Molnar, a Hungarian artist, she gained access to one of these early computers. Her work expresses the balance between harmony and chaos, or order and disorder. Basically, she did this by using PRNGs, so randomness. We got to keep in mind, though, that computer programming at this time was incredibly challenging, and it was very tedious to write. So only a select few of artists even had access to these kinds of computers, usually through the universities or institutions. But if we fast forward a few decades, in 2001, two MIT multimedia artists, Casey Reyes and Ben Fry, wrote a piece of software called Processing. And this software allows for artists and designers to quickly create visual output. So the complexities of programming have greatly evolved to be much easier to learn and easier to write. So now anyone can download free software and create art with code. So far, this tool has inspired hundreds, if not thousands, of people to harness the power of computation and randomness for the purposes of creative expression. Today, artists are using computer code to create works that are deeply reflective and expressive around concepts such as data visualization, live interactive performance, real-time interactivity using light, sensors, motors, and sounds. You tend to see these things pop up at museums lately. Live coding events are a thing where artists create code on the spot in front of an audience. Even large-scale commercial and retail displays that incorporate real-time evolving visuals. What's interesting to note is that every digital display device becomes a potential canvas for artistic expression. And there are a lot of digital displays out there. So a lot of potential canvases for artists like me. So how does all of this relate to Web3? That's the real big question here. Is anyone familiar with Ethereum? Yeah? Okay. So blockchain token standards like the ERC 721 on the Ethereum blockchain happens to be an excellent source of randomness. Each token contains a random hash string composed of many unpredictable numbers and letters. So down here, you can see the random hash string. And it's just a big jumble of randomness. So what we do as artists is we take that random string and we feed it into our algorithm. So that is the seed value that we put into the algorithm. And what comes out is a unique work of art that can only be produced by that one particular token. So the token seeds the algorithm with its hash string and produces an output. If you were to use the same seed token, it will always produce the same output. So that's deterministic. This basic concept allows artists to use their generative art algorithms like a digital printing press, except that each output is different from the next in a slight and subtle way. This is a generative art edition. And these editions can be small or large and limited in quantity, or if the artist desires, the edition can be open and endless, virtually infinite. And because each artwork is tied to a token, the resulting digital asset can participate in market dynamics, just like a traditional intangible work of art. In simple words, these art pieces can be minted, collected, purchased, sold, traded, viewed, stored, burned, and transferred. As a result, a highly robust and dynamic market economy has formed around these early tokenized digital art assets. In November of 2020, my brother, an artist and entrepreneur named Daniel Calderon, pioneered this concept using a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. The smart contract allows artists to publish their artwork in this way. His project Artblocks was started right here in Houston, Texas, and since 2020 has hosted more than 300 artists who have collectively generated more than 277,000 unique artwork. As of April 2024, the Artblocks ecosystem has seen a total sales volume of around 1.46 billion US dollars on the primary and secondary market. This is activity of collectors buying, selling, and trading these types of artworks. Artblocks is the leading online art platform focusing on generative art editions. Chromie Squiggle is a project created by Eric under the pseudonym Snowfro, and it's a quintessential project to highlight some of the cool features of this art form. Basically, it's an addition of 10,000 unique and colorful squiggly lines. This is just a small selection of them. But because everything is on-chain and quantifiable, an array of statistics can be extracted from the artwork and used to classify traits, features, rarities, etc. So for example, the standard squiggle up there, 61% of the outputs from the algorithm are going to be like that, whereas the hyperpipe or the bold pipe, those are super rare pieces, and you're very lucky to even see one of those come out of the algorithm. So because there's rarities here, it creates collectability dynamics within each artwork edition. And this is just an example of how it's sometimes displayed in an exhibition. Got some displays with squiggles on them, and then the code on the wall that generates the work. So what is the artwork? Is it the code? Is it the output? It's kind of like one of those discussions. So let's look at some more examples. This is Fidenza by Austin-based artist Tyler Hobbs. It's an addition of 999 generative outputs using an algorithm developed over many years. And this is the artist that actually coined the term long-form generative art. So we refer to these blockchain editions as long-form generative art projects. And you can kind of see that each work is unique, but they all come from the same algorithm. It's sort of like iterations on a common theme. This is another popular edition called Ringers by Canadian artist Dmitry Cherniak. It's an addition of 1,000 unique outputs, each exploring variations in the way a string can be wrapped around a set of pegs. And this kind of shows a huge number of them. And it's important to note that the artist ultimately has the final say of the aesthetics of the project, right? They decide how much yellow, how much green, what the project looks like. It's all aesthetic decisions that the artist has to make. This is Fragments of an Infinite Field by Monica Rizzoli, a Brazilian artist. It's an edition of 1,024 outputs that express a variety of colorful floral themes. And some of the artworks relate to the seasons like winter and spring and summer. But generally they all have this sort of nice floral, almost like a wallpaper aesthetic. And then finally, this is one of my own pieces called Really Random Rock. And it's an edition of 350 artworks that explore the random and interesting forms that a rock can take. And one thing that makes this project unique is that it's designed for plotting. So each output can be plotted directly onto paper using a pen plotter. And it's the same sort of dynamic as the early pioneering artists in the 1960s. So where are we now? Major museums and institutions like LACMA and MoMA have begun acquiring these works. A variety of public and private collectors have begun amassing collections. Some of these are DAOs, some of these are art funds, and some of these are just individuals that have been around and been buying stuff just for their own vaults. They vault these works. Vaulting basically means you store them away in a wallet that's not connected to the internet, and with the idea of never selling it. So holding it for your whole life. New platforms are entering the space that provide novel ways to publish this kind of art, and they're pushing the genre forward. Artblocks is basically the pioneer, and there's a bunch of other ones that have kind of joined the party. And some of them are on different blockchains or L2s. Dedicated publications are emerging, which focus on looking at this art movement as a whole through a critical lens, which is a much needed thing for any kind of art medium. Just this month, Art Forum published a magazine cover with a generative artist on the cover. And earlier this year, Taschen, the book publisher, released a major volume called On NFTs, featuring a lot of generative art. And it's actually right over there if you get a chance to go flip through the pages. It's a stellar 30 pounds in weight. Major museum exhibitions are happening displaying these kinds of artworks by pioneers like Harold Cohen, who worked with plotters in the 1970s. He also used a little bit of what he called AI, which is a really early form of it. Some debate it's not really AI, but still was doing cool stuff with computers. And then Vera Molnar at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. This was earlier this year. And likely one of the most exciting portions of it, in my opinion, is generative manufacturing is beginning to emerge. You have products that are created on demand from algorithm directly to production machinery. And a couple examples, like the chairs down there are designed by an artist, the weaving pattern on them. The hoodie right there is pieced together by various swatches of fabric by algorithms. You have the stained glass that's made by an artisan from a set of steps from the computer. And then this huge tapestry which gets woven by computer-controlled looms. And then down here on the bottom, you have a sort of like paint by numbers heart in craft project. And just recently, it flew up on a spaceship and was photographed in space, which is a cool picture there. And there's just so much more. I mean, there's virtual galleries, there's physical galleries, marketplaces popping up here and there. There's entire websites that just focus on aggregating all these statistics about the artworks and who's buying what, who's selling what. There's DAOs that form around the artists and around particular art styles. There's auction sales happening at Sotheby's and Christie's. There's people representing artists as consultants and appraisers, representing sellers as appraisers. There's experiences like Bright Moments, which is a group that took this concept and went around the world with it by hosting live in-person minting sessions. So in order to receive the work, you had to go to the exhibition, press the button, and mint the work directly in front of a crowd. And they just finished a tour around the world at 10 different cities. Residencies and grants that are popping up, and a lot of sponsorship opportunities. Brands like Mercedes and I can't even think of them right now, but tons of random brands that you would think, damn, they're doing blockchain stuff. And then as a final note, a more touching one is that the generative art community got to witness some of the earliest computer art pioneers. We got to see their careers come full circle. So Vera Molnar, who is one of the earliest of them all, continued making work her entire life up until the final year. And in 2023, she actually released her first generative on-chain NFT project before she passed away. So that's kind of a really cool thing to see. And then the same thing with Herbert Frank, who is arguably the pioneer. They call him the dinosaur because he's so old. But he passed away just 2 years ago, just moments before his project released on the blockchain. So what will the future hold? Honestly, I do not know. But what I do know is all it takes to participate is a computer and a web browser. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, we can open it up to questions if anyone has any.
So to make generative art, like what do you need? Like how would somebody start doing this?
So you start with a laptop and a browser.
What programming languages do you speak?
So almost all of this artwork is created with JavaScript. And there's a library called P5, which is a branch of processing that we use.
So, sorry, what is that?
So
What is processing? No, what is
the library P5?
Yeah, what's this sort of translation between P5?
Basically, P5 it's like a way to use JavaScript in a much easier format so that you can draw circles and squares and colors and shapes and lines and things like that to a canvas. And it just makes it very easy for almost anybody to just jump right into this kind of medium.
Follow-up question, and this is not just for you. I have been doing this shit for a while. I use Touch, and that's mostly Python. And I'm not going to laud anybody for not learning the language, but it's also like a visual programming language that you can use at this point, like in order to create generative art. I feel like it's more of a comment. I get distracted. I was But like,
I mean, Python is very much an incredible language for this kind of stuff, and it's been around for a long time. Touch Designer goes way back, and you'll see people using that at concerts and audiovisual uses. But the problem is that it's not super friendly for the web. Like it's not native. Like JavaScript is native to the web, so it makes it super easy to just create this work and distribute it through things like blockchain.
like group question, and I don't mean to overreach, but like, has anybody thought about using the term digital sculpture? I feel like I made that up. And I've said that a lot, and it works. It's nice. It's got leverage.
It's a good term. I don't know. Like, what does it
There
mean?
are collectors out there who are mad because of blockchain and because of the drama, and I think digital sculpture is righteous. I think maybe we should kind of collectively adopt that. Here.
I mean, there's platforms out there where you can upload code that produces three-dimensional models that then gets bought and sold. I basically meant for 3D printing. So you can.
In terms of investment, like skills and human effort and creativity, like the raw data, and like the heat that you can move like through the tools that we have access to, I think it's viable to be able to call it art. So why not just call it a type of media that people are familiar with, like we're crafting things. The dimensionality is maybe abstracted through the tool set and through the interface, but I think sculpture might be the way forward for people like us. It's not just generative art, it's digital sculpture.
I mean, I don't know, like what do you mean by digital sculpture? Are you talking about like files on a computer, or are you talking about things that are
a marketable product, right?
like?
That's sort of why your just sort of contextual lecture didn't make sense. I want to admit what I'm saying. That's not fair to you, but the history speaks for itself. And then what's next?
Well, I actually went to school for sculpture, so I have a bachelor's and a master's in sculpture. I've studied digital fabrication, and there's a lot of overlap with, generative art, digital tools. So basically, generative
Make it a craft. Why not make it about hands and clay? It is sculpture.
What do you? Well, I think it's like distinct. I mean, this is he's talking about generative art that's like you're using like kind of like a seed to generate new through an algorithm versus creating something in touch design where it's like basically you're creating an individual.
Yeah, no, I'm not on that level, right? So I can't say that, but it's fair to you to be able to explain that. In order to have this as an adopted form of collectible art,
Well, how about this? How about we have an open discussion later on, like with a mingle, because we're gonna have a mingle afterwards.
we'll do.
Sorry,
what you said.
well, let's have a discussion later, and then let's keep going.
Okay.
So if anybody has any more questions.
Yeah, I got one. You said, that the art could be either the code or what it actually produces. And with what's happening with AI and just historically with digital artists, the output being something that could be easily screenshot or ripped off or printed, or for people who work in physical mediums, they use, there's the original painting and then there's, a print. I guess where in generative art how do you feel about someone ripping off your algorithm to create their own thing, and kind of that recycling of art and code, as well as people maybe ripping off what was generated and posting it as a new NFT, and that kind of forgery in the marketplace.
So both of those things do happen. There's many cases of people, right-clicking and saving a graphic and then launching an NFT collection based on that. But because blockchain is transparent, the original artwork, the source of the original artwork can always be seen, right? So you can do that all you want. I mean, that's a copyright violation. So certain platforms that are, based where, depending on where they're based, they can take down that content or not, but it still exists on the blockchain. There's no way to stop that, but any collector that does their due diligence will go and find the original artwork at the source of where it came from, and that would be the original artist. The code itself is actually public.
It is public.
Yeah, so like it's visible, and people do sort of take it and they rip it off and, make it their own. But sometimes that's okay, like within a certain amount of wiggle room. In the arts, like people take the Mona Lisa and repaint it and put a mustache on it, right? So like it's very much it's a welcome sort of derivative in some cases. Depends on the copyright of the work, of course.
And is that the same between art blocks and OpenSea? Like OpenSea is more just like JPEG that's attached to an address, isn't it? Correct? Versus is art blocks actually demonstrating the code?
Right.
Okay.
So art blocks, yeah, they're the algorithms are actually on the chain.
Okay.
Whereas most JPEGs that you see, like on OpenSea, like the Bored Apes, for example, those are just, they're on IPFS somewhere stored. They could go down. But what's cool is that kind of like when we listen to classical music today, those classical music scores were written in the 16s and 1700s. They're basically just a sequence of steps. They're notes, right? And so anybody can reproduce that work. Well, these algorithms are stored on chain, and anybody who has a computer in JavaScript can just reproduce the work in its entirety, in its exactness. So it's the steps to make the work. So you don't even have to worry about the actual artwork itself. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Good question.
But that's where the blockchain comes in, right? Is the verifiability.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what differentiates from the AI itself on its own, right?
Yeah, and then immutability as well, so it can never be altered. People know that this particular algorithm was published at that particular time, and somebody, were to go do their due diligence,
We do
they're able
it.
to verify
It's
it,
regulated.
right? So,
And
which
this
is
is
kind of unusual relative to, I think, a lot of other art mediums where you have to verify, you have to make sure, see all the nuances and pieces. This is all just very, straightforward to be able to
Yeah.
verify that.
Basically based on,
Question over here. Yeah, just curious, can you speak on anything interesting being done in the music space in relation to generative art?
Yeah.
There's a couple of projects I've seen that mostly they've been about random music production. So you'll get these projects that are just kind of interesting, weird sounding tunes that don't really necessarily have a melody or harmony or anything. It's more like just random audio, which is really cool. There's been a few that I've seen on platforms like Artblocks and others.
There's text generative, right?
Text generative art too, yeah.
Text generative
There's what?
Text generated audio.
Text. Oh yeah. I think you can do that with AI. I'm not too familiar with AI stuff. But the P5 library has a
image and just data bend it, take an image and then turn it into ASCII and then put that into another thing.
Mm-hmm. There's libraries that come with P5 that are audio libraries, so it's pretty easy to kind of start playing with tunes tones and pitches and start making music with that.
There's free third-party software that are not DAWs, digital audio workstations, that you can do some pretty cool stuff to bring arrangements that are in Python.
Cool.
They're free as well.
Cool. So there's stuff out there. It's just a matter of playing around with it. And, yeah. Question.
So I'm new to the generative art space. How does it work? So say I have an algorithm that uses generative art from random to random string. So does the artist feed multiple random strings or random numbers to it, and then the output is a bunch of images, and then the artist selects one that the artist thinks is visually appealing, or is it
That's a great question. No, actually, so what you're referring to is what is now called short form generative art. That's when an artist, maybe like they don't put their algorithm on the blockchain yet. They flip through a whole bunch of different outputs, pick out the ones they like the best, and then just take those outputs and put those on the blockchain. So that's kind of like a hand selection, like a hand curation by the artist. Yeah, and so long form, what this format does is it leaves it all up to the algorithm. So if you're a collector, you're going to come and mint one of these pieces. You don't know what it's going to look like. The artist doesn't know what it's going to look like. It's a total surprise. I mean, it could be blue or green or pink. It could be, beautiful. It could also be a little weird. It's just a surprise. Like it's like a gumball machine. I like to call it that, but which is way more sophisticated. So I think there's an element, and also when the collector presses that mint button, like maybe that instant, that second determines what that block string is, that hash string is. So they play a role in what that artwork looks like. So it's just there's a surprise element to it that makes it a little more exciting. Yeah, Hannah.
Okay, so what do you think are the limits of this art form? Like, what do you feel like has been maybe like done to completion or hasn't been explored yet?
That's a really good question. I mean, there's all kinds of limitations. There's, everything's stuck on a screen. We are trying to find ways to make it more tangible, right? Through manufacturing, there's, I'm not really sure. There's limitations everywhere, but
So can I give you
yeah.
cursory observations? There's a lot of abstract and geometric. Is there something that I also feel about nature inspired?
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect example. Because coding takes a little bit of time to learn, it's challenging. Fresh out of the box, these tools give you shapes like rectangles and circles and squares, right? So you're going to see a lot of the artwork highly geometric. It's hard to break out of that and to get into nature or representation or human forms or things that are, that rival anything you can do with painting, right? It's hard to break out of that geometric level, but it is possible. It's just a matter of time and practice and whatnot. Bertiri.
Yeah, well, I just want to say kudos to you and your brother for reaching this level in generative art. Two questions. So first, to make it more practical, where do you suggest to go besides this space that Giorgio has with Meet-Up? Where do you suggest to go as a Houston to be more knowledgeable about this? And second, how feasible do you think it is for other artists to make it sustainable in this field?
So your first question, like where do you go around Houston to see this kind of stuff? There's one gallery that's opened up called Assembly. They're on Montrose. I don't know the address, but they've started exhibiting more generative stuff. They've actually had one exhibition so far where they had screens everywhere, and people could come in and learn about the works and see them. And then later this year, in ArtBlocks hosts an event in Marfa, Texas, every year, and this occurs in November. And a huge community of generative art collectors. Yeah, did you go last year?
Yeah.
Sweet.
I don't mean to be crass, but it's free, and they feed you and they feed you drinks for 3 days. And
Yeah, I mean there's that, of course, but
take away the frame from. So take away what do they call it? Still life. Take away the still life. Take away the subject. Take away the frame,
take away the canvas, and what do you get? How do you do art outside of the museum, outside of the gallery? Is it even art? Take away the canvas, it's digital art. It's so funny to me. And I'll never stop being funny. Because the locals don't know why you're there.
Right.
It's
a pretty
it's digital art in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean it's in the middle of the desert. Literally, there's nothing out there. Like it's a trek to get out there, and because it's not easy to get out there, then you get real diehards that are really in it for the art. They're in it for the people, the community. Well, the first year there was I think around 200 people, then 300, and now there's 500 and maybe projected more this year. So it's growing, and it's just like a super exciting place. There's a gallery, there's an Art Blocks gallery in headquarters in Marfa, Texas. There's a new gallery that opened up called Glitch that has all generative art exhibitions. There's all kinds of stuff happening out there. So yeah, look into it if you're interested in this. And then just to answer your second question, what was it? How to get involved? Is it sustainable for artists? I think that it still can be, yes. All of this blew up in 2020, and there was a lot of excitement, and things are still happening in this space every day. I live on Twitter, and I kind of follow along with all the events. There's artists releasing work, there's collectors buying works. It's super active. So I would say and it's a growing space. So there's plenty of room for artists to come in and find a somewhat sustainable, depending on how, how ambitious the artist is, right? Like it's competitive. So, and it's becoming more competitive. So you kind of have to, get real active on social media and create really good work. But it's still very much an active community, and there's plenty of ways to make it sustainable. Yeah.
I have some comments actually.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind.
Please.
Firstly, is thanks for being here, and obviously, what your brother has done as a pioneer in this space. You have to take swords, proverbially speaking, in your back, right, for being that pioneer and leading. Mm-hmm. I just returned from Los Angeles, very active in the industry. The evolution of what we currently define as NFTs are not going to go away. They're only going to continue to evolve. And the understanding of how we build communities, this is just being one small piece of the Houston global ecosystem of people that have an interest in the evolution of the science, math, and the technology applied by any other name outside of the blockchain. So whatever you want to call it, an NFT or generative art, the music, the AI, all of that is an evolution of this tech. So I was looking for something I was going to show whoever was asked about audio. I had a chance to meet with the musician Stephen F. Stewart, who apparently is a renowned musician, and some other guy, Johnson. He has an artist by the name of Drake, I think one of his clients, and a project called Mixed Tape. And the Mixed Tape project is the crossroads of how all of this analog and digital and NFCs, sculptures, if you might, whatever art form you choose, will be able to cross into that, including the likes of adult entertainment, believe it or not, and the ability to have your AI girlfriend or boyfriend and your digital twin. So, to the gentleman who was asking about up front, is there any opportunity? The opportunity lies clearly in front of us. And you looking in your rearview mirror, you might can see where you've been, but to know where we're going, it's really all uncharted opportunities.
That's a good point.
Earlier, there was a question about 3D objects or other forms other than the graphical output. But I guess the question is now there's the use of NFTs as objects or assets within other platforms like video games and such. Have there been attempts to do generative assets that can be used in skins?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. There's people trying to make games around this. There's There's the idea that you could have generative elements in a game that are tokenized.
Like procedural.
Yeah, procedural, but also kind of like
That's procedural
is the word you're looking for?
No, for you, in order to make this sustainable, procedural is the next
Yeah.
step.
So yeah, there are some activities around that. I've seen a couple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Oh yeah.
So I think one of the previous questions we were talking about, like, besides just random numbers, different forms of input you have. I was wondering if you, I don't know how realistic this is, I was wondering if you have any example of people using like brain scans as input for generating art?
That sounds pretty awesome. I don't think I've seen that yet, but
The possibilities that
yeah, you can basically you can create, you can quantify basically anything. Like Coinbase, for example, they seed their like security measures using a wall of lava lamps that have a camera pointed at it. And so, like, since all these bubbles are moving at different rates, and they take all that visual data that goes into the camera and turn it into ones and zeros, and turn it into some kind of random seed that they use to seed their security system, I guess. So, like, if you can take brain data and quantify it somehow, and seed it as a, seed a PRNG with it, that could produce some interesting results. Giorgio.
I got a question about what's your perspective on the relationship between you and the people that, like, for example, you mentioned when you're the process of minting an NFT. I can attest that, like, minting an NFT, the experience of doing that, the kind of adrenaline rush of like, okay, I don't know what it's going to be like, and then also somehow like getting emotionally attached to this piece that you were involved in the creation of it. So I thought that was a really interesting experience. What is your perspective on how that is going to like develop, or how your experience with that, like people who have, like your NFTs? Like, I know that when I was over at Marfa and I got I wanted your little pin because I was like, man, I love that the FS. And so can you give some background on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think that's the real draw of the medium, is the unpredictability and the surprise of what you're going to get. Like, there's anticipation, and part of it plays into the rarities of things. Like, maybe I'll get the rare output that there's only one of in an edition of 1,000, and there's value associated with that, or there's like, you can flex like online with that kind of stuff, and it's fun, right? But yeah, I mean, that's very much part of it. I like to think of it as when I was a kid, we used to open up baseball cards, or actually comic cards mostly, but you would quickly flip through it to see if you got a hologram, right? And that would be like the exciting card to get. So it's just about, it's about surprise and unexpected, it's unexpected art. That's what it is. So what was your question?
Well, I mean, how do you think that's going to develop? Do you think that the relationship with the artist and the patron is going to expand? Is there going to be more kind of like for example, the whole, art that's interactive, that you're in the piece and then it's like interacting with what you're providing inputs? Like, could it become more, because right now all that, kind of the primitive form is that when you generate a new NFT, you're using your hash, but could it include more information, like, from the person to the patron? Like, is there an interest in artists getting more data from and incorporating the art?
Yeah, I've actually seen that. There's a platform, I don't know if it's still around, but it was around for a couple of years, that lets the collector sort of use a bunch of sliders and like input values to generate the artwork themselves, and then until they find a satisfactory composition, and then they could mint that directly. So what it's doing is it's just putting like the burden of curation on the collector as opposed to the artist. There's a lot of debate about whether these things should be totally random or whether artists should do like the short form where they sort of curate the works ahead of time and release. There's been successful instances of both. So generally, I think that there's nothing's really settled there. It's still open to what people want to do. But also, just in terms of getting more out of these works, like some of these projects are super interactive and take input, like camera input, and you can sort of like control the artwork by capturing your video. There's things like that. There's just in general interactivity is definitely come into the works over time, and animation and things like that. So. Yeah. Let's go with you. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Please.
Does it work with VR?
VR. It just depends. Like there's a couple of pieces I've seen where they're VR enabled, so you can sort of step into the artwork and visualize it in 3D space. There's also, I would say the majority of them are not, because not everybody has like the headset, right? So it sort of limits who can participate in that way, but there are a lot of galleries, like virtual galleries, that are VR enabled. So you can go and experience the exhibitions of these works in 3D space. And I think that's more promising because you can sort of, see the work in a huge scale or a small scale. You can sort of fly around the gallery and
I was asking about the generative environment. So maybe there's some tools that can help you to generate environment through some abstract.
There's some GitHub stuff for that. For sure.
Tool-wise, yeah, there's got to be stuff out there. 3JS is a JavaScript library that is designed for 3D, just general 3D modeling. And it's also natively used in a lot of these generative art projects. The thing is that not every library is available on the blockchain. There's been efforts to put the entire P5 library itself on the Ethereum blockchain, and they've actually done it. So P5 is one that's definitely available. Other ones, a more obscure library, where is it hosted, right? It's on IPFS. IPFS can go down, IPFS is not 100% on chain, right? And so we, as artists, as generative artists, I think this community that at least I'm involved in is we try to keep things that are on chain because on chain guarantees the longest survival. Maybe we take it too far, but I think it's important. So, yeah. Question?
Sorry, so speaking of that, what are your thoughts? I'm just kind of curious about ordinals and Bitcoin since it's all on chain. Are you a fan of that? Is it even possible with long form?
It is possible. Actually, an artist just, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, Harvey Rayner released a project called Chatfucker. And it's a PFP project. A PFP is like a profile picture, character sort of thing. And it's on ordinals. It's fully on-chain generative. I'm not sure how he did it because I just stick with Ethereum. In fact, I didn't even collect any because I don't even know how to deal with ordinals yet. I've never jumped the gap. There's there's resistance, I think, for some artists to just pick any random blockchain and do work on it. Ethereum's base is well greased, so it's where a lot of us stay. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's pretty awesome, actually. Yeah.
Yes. What trends have you seen, or do you foresee with embedded generative art? It only makes sense for platforms just take Twitch, Twitter, YouTube. It would only make sense for them to allow their users to create their own content on that platform itself, right? As opposed to using Stage Diffusion and Midjourney.
Yeah.
You create a little profile picture or whatever. Where do you see that? Do you believe you see that?
I do actually, I think it's already happening. ArtBlocks, for example, has leased out its software or its technology to a variety of third-party people or companies or platforms, and they build their own environments and ecosystems around these contracts. So Reddit, for example, has NFT integration with their little alien character. You can buy and sell them and use them as PFPs. But they're not using ArtBlocks technology. So I think it's just a matter of if the platform wants to adopt that kind of thing, you know? It's very integratable. If you can just produce stuff with JavaScript, then you can put it anywhere on the web. And that's the cool thing about it. So.
Do you have a provider that you would recommend? A service, API service,
I mean, personally, I have no idea because I don't do that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you're interested in integrating this kind of thing in something, then reach out to ArtBlocks. They have what's called the ArtBlocks engine, and they'll give you your own smart contracts that you can deploy at your own will or at your own leisure, and you can use them to integrate them into whatever you want. There's people that are integrating it into clothing brands, like with NFC chips. There's people that are creating different kinds of platforms. There's like a embroidery platform that's using the ArtBlocks technology to mint artworks that go directly to embroidery machines. There's all kinds of random stuff happening. There's Bright Moments that took the technology and creates physical experiences, minting experiences with it. So like it just depends on what you want to do with it. But the ArtBlocks engine is that technology.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Do you think making digital art from like gardening or manufacturing?
I mean, it's whatever you want it to be. For me, I like to think of it as rock gardening, like a Japanese landscape garden. I'm into that kind of stuff, so I do make analogies between coding and rock gardens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So. Do we want to get one more question? Then we,
Sure, let's do that.
And then we can go over to weights and measures right after.
Cool.
Cool. Anybody has any more questions?
You said you got to work with pioneers, or that the pioneers got to work with this technology just before they passed. Had they seen that the process, the technology had really come a long way, or that it was just now emerging and having a market for it and kind of recognition?
Yeah, I think it was more of the latter. When generative art emerged in the 1960s, it didn't really find a footing. So it was this blip, and then it kind of went into obscurity for 30, 40 years. Because, people still explored these kinds of things, especially with computers, but there wasn't a way to monetize this kind of work. There wasn't necessarily an easy way to collect it. A lot of the early generative art was mostly geometric compositions that collectors or even critics thought it looked ugly. And too cold and too mechanical. So it didn't necessarily find its footing back then. And just with the rise of blockchain and on-chain generative art is when all these artists, said this is what was missing. So they were able to, launch their projects, publish their works, and do all that stuff, buy and sell and trade and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was like the missing puzzle. And so now that it's here, there's a lot of pent up energy and demand just kind of skyrocketed for it. So it's a good question. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Daniel.